His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Goswami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jayam Vishnupada Paramahansa Pariprajaka Sotara Sata Shri Srimad Divine Grace Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur Maharaj Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Brinda Ki Jai. ISKCON Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Prem Chekaho Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Sri Radha Krishna Go Gopinath Shama Kunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhana Ki Jai. Shri Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai. Shri Navadvip Dham Ki Jai. Shri Shri Mayapur Dham Ki Jai. Shri Shri Navadvip Dham Ki Jai. Shri Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Jai. Shri Shri Gaurnitai Ki Jai. Shri Shri Krishna Balaram Ki Jai. Shri Shri Gaurnitai Ki Jai. Shri Shri Gaurnitai Ki Jai. Shri Shri Krishna Balarama Ki Jai. Shri Shri Govardhana Dari Ki Jai. Shamaveda Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga. Narayanam Naraskricham Naram Chaivam Narotamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudiraya Nastapreshu Abardeshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shlokir Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki. So we're going to be reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam, 2nd Canto, 4th Chapter, text number 8. It's a repeat of yesterday's class. I'm just going to try to get through the whole purport today. And I'm repeating this because Prabhupada wanted us to have a Bhagavatam class every day. And he said on a few occasions that he used the word threadbare, that we should discuss the topics discussed in Srimad Bhagavatam threadbare, which means, very, very minutely to discuss them. When I was at university at Reed College, it was kind of a alternative type of college. They said that we should discuss things that we learned in our history classes because it would be more, we would understand them more deeply instead of just hearing what a professor said, if we discuss them among ourselves. And so that was Prabhupada's mood, that everything should be not only heard but discussed, threadbare. So as I was saying in my last class, the important thing is to continuously read. I've noticed that sometimes devotees They like Krishna consciousness because it's very celebrative and it's very there's a lot of dancing and there's a lot of good food and friendliness and cleanliness. But if they don't read the books, they tend to drift off into Maya. I mean, Maya is very strong. And if one isn't very conversant with this philosophy, it's very easy to get dissuaded or distracted because of Maya's very strong pull on us. Anyway, I'm going to carry on. Nunam Bhagavato Brahman Harir Adbhuta Karmanaha Turshi Vavyam Ivabati Kavibish Chapi Chestitam Nunam Bhagavata Brahman Hariradbhuta Karmanaha Turbo Bhavyam Ivabati Kavibish Chapi Chestitam Nunam Bhagavato Brahman Hariradbhuta Karmanaha Druta Bhavyam Avibhati Kavibish Chapi Chestitam Nudam Bhagavato Brahman Hariradbhuta Karmanaha Durabhayam Ivabhati Kavibish Chapi Chestitam Nunam, still insufficient. Bhagavataha, the personality of Godhead. Brahman, O learned Brahmana. Harehe, of the Lord. Adbhuta, wonderful. Karmanaha, one who acts. Durvibhavyam, inconceivable. Eva, like that. Abhati, appears. Kavibihi, even by the highly learned. Cha, also. Api, in spite of. Chestitam, being endeavored for. Translation by Srila Prabhupada. O learned Brahmana, the transcendental activities of the Lord are all wonderful, and they appear inconceivable because even great endeavors by many learned scholars have still proved insufficient for understanding them. Responsively, O learned Brahman, the transcendental activities of the Lord are all wonderful, and they appear inconceivable because even great endeavors by many learned scholars still have proved insufficient for understanding them. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The acts of the Supreme Lord in the creation of just this one universe appear inconceivably wonderful. And there are innumerable universes, and all of them aggregated together are known as the created material world. And this part of his creation is only a fractional portion of the complete creation. The material world stands as a part only, ekam shena stito jagat. Supposing that the material world is a display of one part of his energy, the remaining three parts consist of the Vaikuntha Jagat, or spiritual world, described in the Bhagavad Gita as Madhyama, or Sanatana Dharma, or the eternal world. We have marked in the previous verse that he creates and again winds up the creation. This action is applicable only in the material world because the other, greater part of his creation, namely the Vaikuntha world, is neither created nor annihilated. Otherwise, the Vaikuntha Dham would not have been called eternal. The Lord exists with Dhamma. His eternal name, quality, pastimes, entourage, and personality are all a display of his different energies and expansions. The Lord is called Anadi, or having no creator, and Adi, or the origin of all. We think in our own imperfect way that the Lord is also created, but the Vedanta informs us that he is not created. Rather, everything else is created by him, Narayana Paro Vyakta, Therefore, for the common man, these are all very wonderful matters for consideration. Even for great scholars, they are inconceivable. And thus, such scholars present theories contradictory to one another. Even for the insignificant part of his creation, this particular universe, they have no complete information as to how far this limited space extends, or how many stars and planets are there, or the different conditions of those innumerable planets. Modern scientists have insufficient knowledge of all this. Some of them assert that there are 100 million planets scattered all over space. In a news release from Moscow, dated 2/21/60, I guess that's the 21st of February. They do things kind of backwards, or in this country, or in America, in the United States. The following piece of knowledge was relayed. Quote, Russia's well-known professor of astronomy, Boris Vorontsov-Belyaminov. Did I pronounce that right? I think they say Boris instead of Boris. Anyways. What, and Belyaminov? Is that right?
Yeah, that's okay.
Okay, but not correct. That there must be an infinite number of planets in the universe, inhabited by beings endowed with reason. It should be that the life similar to that on Earth flourishes on such planets. Doctor of Chemistry, Nikolai Zirov, I think I got that right, covering the problem of atmosphere on other planets, pointed out that the organism of a Martian, for instance, could very well adapt itself to normal existence with a low body temperature. He said that he felt that the gaseous composition of Martian atmosphere was quite suitable to sustain life of beings which have become adapted to it. End quote. Unquote. Then back to Prabhupada's purport. The adaptability of an organism to different varieties of planets is described in the Brahma Samhita as the Vibhuti Binam. That is, each and every one of the innumerable planets within the universe is endowed with a particular type of atmosphere, and the living entities there are more perfectly advanced in science and psychology because of a better atmosphere. Vibhuti means, quote, specific powers, unquote, and Binam means, quote, variegated, unquote. Scientists who are attempting to explore outer space and are trying to reach other planets by mechanical arrangements must know for certain that organisms adapted to the atmosphere of Earth cannot exist in the atmosphere of other planets. Open parentheses, easy journey to other planets, close parentheses. One has to prepare himself, therefore to be transferred to a different planet after being relieved of the present body. As it is said in the Bhagavad Gita 9:25, Yanti Deva Vrata Devan, Pitrin Yanti Pitri Vrataha, Bhutana Yanti Bhuteja, Yanti Mad Yajinopimam. Those, quote, those who worship the demigods will take birth among the demigods. Those who worship ghosts and spirits will take birth among such beings. And those who worship me will live with me, unquote. Maharaj Parikshit's statement regarding the workings of the creative energy of the Lord discloses that he knew everything of the process of creation. Why then did he ask Shukadeva Goswami for such information? Maharaj Parikshit, being a great emperor, a descendant of the Pandavas and a great devotee of Lord Krishna, was quite able to know considerably about the creation of the world. But that much knowledge was not sufficient. He said therefore that even greatly learned scholars failed to know about that, even after great effort. The Lord is unlimited, and his activities are also unfathomed. With a limited source of knowledge and with imperfect senses, any living being up to the standard of Brahmaji, the highest perfect living being within the universe, can never imagine knowing about the unlimited. We can know something of the unlimited when it is explained by the unlimited, as has been done by the Lord himself in the unique statements of the Bhagavad Gita. And it can also be known to some extent from realized souls like Shukadeva Goswami, who learned it from Vyasadeva, a disciple of Narada. And thus, the perfect knowledge can descend by the chain of disciplic succession only, and not by any form of experimental knowledge, old or modern. Om Gyanatimirandasya Garavantana Salakaya Chaksur Unmilitam Jina Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangam Longayate Girim Yat Kripa Tarham Vande Shri Gurudina Tanane. It's interesting that at the very end of this purport, Prabhupada talks about Narada learning, or Vyasa learning from Narada, which indicates that even great souls had gurus, they had mentors, they were part of a great succession. And Prabhupada also mentions that we can know to some extent from realized souls like Shukadeva Goswami. So it's also said in the Mahabharata, Mahajana Yena Gita Savanta, that within the minds of these Mahajans, or great souls like Narada and others, Prahlad Maharaj, we can have a great deal of learning. But as he's indicating, we cannot learn everything, but we can learn a lot of things. So we go to class with the idea of learning a lot of things, not necessarily everything. Everything is kind of reserved for the Supreme Lord. We can know something, as Prabhupada writes, we can know something of the unlimited when it is explained by the unlimited, as has been done by the Lord himself in the unique statements of the Bhagavad Gita. In other words, those statements are kind of unchallengeable because they're the unlimited knowledge from the unlimited person. But knowledge that people like myself give, although they help us to deeper into the knowledge of the Bhagavad, they don't have complete knowledge of creation. So it's kind of interesting that some scientists were talking about how you have to adapt to a particular atmosphere in order to be able to live in those planets or somewhere. And the moon excursion, although it's become quite controversial whether human beings actually went there or not, Prabhupada made some very interesting statements about it. And I'm not going to go into all of them, but one of the things he said was that maybe, some of you have read this, that maybe the moon landing was in a deserted part of the moon. And that the people that live in the moon, who are very highly advanced, more than we are, than earthlings, maybe they because they're more intelligent and they saw that these people were coming without visas and proper immigration status, that they directed them to an abandoned deserted part of the moon. And he said, if I remember it correctly, his exact words were, "Why not think that way?" Of course, it's very difficult to understand that they didn't go to the moon. A lot of people said that, well, they went somewhere. Where was it? But there's a lot of studies in sort of astrophysics, and Prabhupada is very intent upon the Temple of the Vedic Planetarium being not just another mandir, but being a kind of planetarium, or saying that the structure of the universe is not what we learned. We learned that the world is in a heliocentric universe, that all the planets go around the sun. But one of the Vedic versions is that all the planets go around the Earth, and they have very interesting orbits. Sometimes the orbits are circular, sometimes they're with circles with curlicues in them. It's very interesting. And once I was talking, a few years ago, with Hari Sori about the exhibits in that planetarium. Not only the chandelier, which is the center point, but the display, the so-called dioramas or three-dimensional holograms, whatever we call them. And there's 19 of these. They're now abandoned cubicles. They're about 3 meters cubed. 3 meters cubed. That's roughly about the size of them. I'm not an aficionado about the temple, and I don't know for sure what it looks like, but I kind of got that idea that that's what they're like. So it's and Hari Sori was saying that we can't change people's minds, but we have to have some really state-of-the-art. I don't know if he used those terms, but very advanced, the kind of stuff that you'd expect to see in Disney World or Disneyland, or there's places in England and other very modern sort of three-dimensional displays. And his conclusion was that, well, we're not going to change people's minds. This was kind of conceived of to defeat the notion of scientists that, for instance, that Darwinian evolution is true and uncontestable, and many other features of so-called modern science. It's interesting that the word science actually comes from Greek and Roman, probably Sanskrit roots, but Scire, I don't know how it's pronounced, was one of the roots of science, and it did mean, and there's probably roots in Sanskrit where it means knowledge. It doesn't just mean technology like it does today. But nonetheless, people subscribe to what is being taught in places like Harvard and MIT and Oxford, which are not really exactly the kind of science that's described in the Bhagavatam. So what Hari was saying was that the best we can hope for is that people will come away with knowledge that, well, maybe they have something there. Maybe, just maybe, they have something. It's maybe better than what we know, or what we've learned. But it's very hard to unlearn things that we've learned. I mean, we learned certain things about the structure of the universe, and Sariputta, the late Sariputta, even went so far as to say that if people don't understand the structure of the universe according to the Vedas, they can't understand the philosophy. I don't necessarily think that that's always true in all situations for all people, but he did say that. So Prabhupada was very challenging. I heard some recordings that were made in 1977 where Prabhupada was saying that he really wanted to challenge the notions, and he was of modern science. He was very busy organizing scientific conferences, especially in India, and he made Swarup Damodar, the late Swarup Damodar, a GBC man, late in 1976 or 1977, because he was a scientist himself, I think in chemistry or biochemistry or something like that. He had his doctorate in one of those disciplines. And he organized some conferences. Whereas people in the West tend to be very atheistic about everything, especially scientists. And they are very atheistic. Whereas in India, they have a tendency, even those people who are very advanced in so-called spiritual knowledge, they have a sense that there is a God, some sense of inconceivability. Prabhupada uses the word duribhavyam to mean inconceivable. But what we generally think of inconceivable as in Sanskrit terms is achintya, like achintya veda veda tattva. So a lot of these scientists thought that the Swarup Damodar's presentations of God being ultimately in control of the world and everything around us is not a fairy tale. It's not a fictional, novelistic idea, which a lot of people in that part of the world still think, unfortunately. And it's kind of a standard thing for beings in educated people in the West to think. But anyway, Hari Sori was saying the best we can hope for, even if we have really state-of-the-art presentations, is that people will come away thinking, well, that was interesting, and it may be right. But not that they're necessarily going to change their view, like Sariputta was saying, that if they don't understand the structure of the universe, they can't understand the philosophy. And Prabhupada, in several instances, asked people to come forward into his presence and map out the structure of the universe according to the Vedas. Whereas we think that all the planets are round, and in a way, that's true because Prabhupada said they're egg-shaped, and some eggs. The eggs of birds tend to be oblong, but eggs of other species like sturgeons and fish and other animals are not shaped like that. They have a round shape. So when he talked about the universe having an egg shape, it's a little bit unusual. And when he also talked about eclipses are a result of Rahu chasing the moon and Rahu being an invisible planet. There's also, if you study astrophysics, you can learn that Rahu is sometimes described as the shadow of the moon, which is kind of like it coincides with modern explanations of what eclipses are like. And they're reflections of, and it's a very sophisticated thing. And to know higher mathematics is to know that something can be both flat and round at the same time. That's for us, that's achintya or inconceivable. But according to higher mathematical calculations, that's actually possible. A thing can be flat and round at the same time, spherical and flat. And Bhumandala may be one of those places. Anyway, Prabhupada in 1977 had several people come forward to present to him what a map of the universe would look like according to the Vedas. And several people came, and Prabhupada was not satisfied that this was a complete explanation. But he wanted a complete explanation. He kind of indicated that was a part of his mission that wasn't fulfilled. He really wanted to challenge the scientific establishment, the scientific, so-called scientific way of looking at things. And that was one of the reasons he organized all these conferences and called all these people. And it's a very difficult thing for Westerners to understand, because one of his devotees was saying, well, if you go west from Los Angeles, will come to India. Of course, you can go east and come to in India also, but it takes a lot longer. So these are the kind of things that Westerners challenge. And Prabhupada himself had been an air traveler, so he knew that truth existed, that you could go from Los Angeles, for example, to Calcutta in a short period of time. And he also knew that the higher you go in an airplane, the longer the days are. And he gave the example of traveling from Paris to Los Angeles, which usually should only take, I don't know, whatever it was. It took something like 9 hours, but it was only 3 or 4 hours in the airplane. So the whole concept of relativity and higher planets, these things exist. And when we talk about east, west, north, and south, and the 8 directions, including northeast, southeast, and southwest, but there's also up and down. And so the whole thing is very unusual for Westerners to conceive. It's actually inconceivable. How difficult it is for scientists, for most scientists, not these Russian guys, they had some idea, but how difficult it is to know what causes things to be created. It's very easy to make things. I mean, we put things together, whether it's jewels or clay or whatever, and or wood, and make cabinets and other things. But we're not actually the creators. Just like Brahma is not he's known to Westerners as the creator. Brahma the creator, Vishnu the preserver, and Shiva the destroyer, I think they think. But Brahma's not actually a creator. He's more like an engineer, or, puts things in place. But the original creator is Krishna. And he can do, very magnificent creations that are very detailed and very sophisticated, including the living beings who can propagate by cohabiting with one another. And he can do these things just by thinking, whereas we have to do a lot of work to create anything. Krishna can do inconceivable things just by thinking. Of course, great yogis could do that too, but Krishna's knowledge and abilities are far beyond any yogi, that he can create... one of these scientists was saying that there's not just hundreds and thousands of universes, there's millions of universes. So this is inconceivable. I mean, we think of the Milky Way and we look up and we see the stars and we think, well, maybe there's 100 or maybe a few thousand, but several million is kind of way far beyond what we conceive of. So that's the inconceivable notion. And that means that human beings can never know complete reality. This might be controversial, because in the West we think that everything can be measurable, everything can be quantifiable. There's angstrom units, there's nanotechnology, and there's macro technology, big things, and they have numbers and names for all these things. But none of them actually can really understand what really is going on. And that's what Prabhupada was challenging. It wasn't just that we have to learn a lot of shlokas and learn what the process of creation is according to the Bhagavatam and who the incarnation. We have to learn those things. That's very important. But at the same time, he wanted to dismantle the misconception that is very rife, very popular among people in this world, that they all think that there's no life after death. Not all, but most people think that there's no life after death. And most people think that they're these bodies. And the basic philosophy of Krishna consciousness, it's the first ABC notion of Bhagavad Gita, is Dehinosmin jata dehe, that we're not the bodies. It's a very difficult thing, and that's the basis of material life. People want to be the controller, they want to be the boss, they want to be God, and they think to be a servant is some kind of obsequious humility, or it's just not proper, because I mean, if you delve into the university knowledge, like to get a PhD, you have to convince the thesis directors that you have a unique thing that you're going to write about. It's something that hasn't been written about before. It hasn't been, and some of these are very, very detailed. They're like 10 or 20 words long, because you really have to convince them that this hasn't been done before. And if it's something that's been done before, they call it plagiarism. But everything that we do in Krishna consciousness is based on knowledge from the Mahajans and what we read in Srimad Bhagavatam, whether it's plagiarism or not. It's our method. So anyway, those are just some of the things that crossed my mind in reading these purports and in reading the verse, which again reads, "O learned Brahman, the transcendental activities of the Lord are all wonderful, and they appear inconceivable because even great endeavors by many learned scholars still have proved insufficient for understanding them." There's this discussion could go on for days and weeks and months and lifetimes, but that's what's written here. Anyways, are there any comments or questions about this or anything else? And I'll do my best to reflect on something or give some sort of guidance or answer. Anything? Yes?
I was reading the Cancer recently. The Prabhupada mentioned that, I was reading in the Cancer, and Prabhupada mentioned there's 3 planetary systems that make up the universe, and I think it's Bhuva, Bhumandala, and Swabaloka. I'm just wondering, how come those 3 are specifically mentioned and not the other planetary systems?
Well, the question was, I guess I don't have to repeat it because you've got a microphone, was why Prabhupada only specified there was 3 systems and not talking about all the others. It's intellectually dishonest to lift something out of what Prabhupada said, even if he said it 3 times, if he said it 100 times, without looking at the entire behavior or sayings on an issue. So, and he says in one part of his teachings that if we say a thing according to our audience and according to where we are, and according to what the time is, time, place, and circumstance, Desha Kalapatra, that's called realization. And it doesn't mean that we always say everything to everyone at all times. But he just wanted us to know the basics. And one of the basic things to learn is that there are 3 levels of the universe. That the Bhumandaloka, what we live in, and there's a lower planetary system and an upper planetary system. And it's often referred to, the 3 worlds, greater than the 3 worlds. But there are other, as you mentioned, there are other worlds and other universes that are beyond our eyesight. That are as we go deeper into the philosophy of Krishna consciousness, as you have, we learn that there are many other unknown and unseen worlds that are there. But at least that's a beginning, to know that there's 3 dimensions. I don't know if that's helpful, but that's part of what that leads to. Anything else? Okay, thank you very much. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
That's all I listen to, Maharshi.